Hey guys, tonight we're slipping through the mist and sweat of a southern Chinese harbor, sometime in the early 1800s, when the air smells like fish guts, coal smoke, and bad decisions. You're barefoot. You've got a scratchy wool sack that's definitely infested with something. And you've just arrived in a city where no one wants to know your name. And the worst part? You're about to accidentally join a pirate empire that will make the British Navy cry. The harbor hums like a hive. You weave between ox carts and shouting vendors, your arms hugging your ribs. The dirt is wet, sticky with fish scales and shrimp shells. Somewhere behind you, someone's playing a bamboo flute off key, and a rooster is absolutely losing its mind. Welcome to Guangdong. You're poor, friendless, and slightly sunburnt, but it's about to get weirder. Overhead, gulls scream, but below, that's where the real sharks are. Men with swords on their hips and flags you don't recognize lean on crates of salt and gunpowder. You spot a ship unlike any you've seen before, sleek, black hull with red sails and dragon carvings flaring at the prow. A scent of incense drifts from it, strangely out of place among the stench of drying squid. You stop walking, you stare. That's not just any junk, that's one of her ships. Now, you may have heard the old tales, pirates with parrots and peg legs, but this isn't the Caribbean. This is the South China Sea, and the most feared name here doesn't belong to a man. Not even close. You've stepped into the domain of Zheng Yi Sao, also known, though never to her face, as Ching Shih. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You head toward the docks, unsure why. Maybe it's the smell of roasted yams from a vendor, or maybe it's that red sail, billowing like a bloodied banner. Either way, your feet are moving. You don't even notice the short man watching you from under a straw hat until you nearly trip over him. He doesn't speak, just nods at the ship. You shake your head. He nods again, this time with a smile. You follow. You're not alone. A small line of dock workers, beggars, and orphaned teens wait at the gangplank. Some carry sacks of rice or buckets of dried anchovies. One girl clutches a rooster. Another boy has a black eye and a smug grin. You're not sure what you're signing up for, but something tells you this line isn't for soup. The man in the straw hat hands you a wooden tag with a red stamp. It smells like sandalwood and sweat. You deliver. You eat. He mumbles. Maybe more. You nod. You have no idea what's happening, but compared to starving, this seems downright professional. On board, the deck is polished with seawater and discipline. Barefoot men and women move with crisp efficiency. You expect chaos, sword fights, barrels of rum, maybe a monkey. But what you find is order, quiet shouting, sharp eyes, buckets of fish sorted by size, a group of teenage girls, hair tied back with red silk, chant numbers as they load cargo. One girl slips you a sweet potato from her sleeve. You're new, she whispers. Don't steal anything. Don't talk back. Don't sleep on duty. You blink. Duty? Welcome to the fleet. She grins. The fleet. That word again. It doesn't hit you until you're back on the docks, following orders, carrying baskets to other ships, each bearing the same red sails and golden phoenix emblems. This isn't just one pirate ship. It's one of dozens, maybe more. You overhear rumors as you work that the woman who commands this fleet once worked in a floating brothel, that she married a pirate captain and took over his empire when he died, that she leads not with brute strength, but with contracts, written codes, punishments, and promises, that she knows every captain's weakness and every official's price. One old man on shore cackles as you pass. She owns the sea now, he mutters. Even the emperor's afraid of her. You try to sleep that night under a tarp near the docks, belly full for the first time in days. But your brain won't shut off. You're not just witnessing history, you're about to become tangled in it. Historians still argue whether the real Ching Shih ever actually set foot on all the ships she controlled, or if she ruled more from behind veils and scrolls. But there's no denying her influence. By the time you arrive, her red flag fleet has become a hydra, thousands of pirates, hundreds of vessels, and one woman holding it all together with terrifying calm. The funny part? You still don't know her face, but you will. The next morning, you're handed a fresh tunic and a chipped bowl of rice. You're officially crew now, at the bottom of the barrel. Sure, but crew, you smile. It's a start. As you carry ropes and listen to the calls of the quartermaster, something shifts inside you. You're not afraid anymore. Not of starving, not of sharks, not even of that crimson sail slicing through the morning fog, because you're part of something now, something bigger than survival, something legendary. You're up before dawn, woken not by a shout but by a single, sharp clap from somewhere above deck. That's the signal. Everyone bolts upright, like marionettes yanked by a single string. You scramble to your feet, stub your toe on a coil of rope, and follow the flurry of movement without thinking. Above you, the sky is barely blushing with light. The air smells briny and thick with smoke. Someone's already burning incense. A long, narrow skiff is tethered alongside the ship. At its bow flutters a tiny square of red silk. You'd think that insignificant, but you've already learned better. That red square means she's coming. No one says her name. Not out loud. Not on deck. It's not fear. Exactly. It's something sharper, like awe, but with splinters. People say she, or the commander, or just gesture slightly with their chins. And when her ship appears, sleek, dark, with red sails curled up like claws, you feel the shift ripple through the water itself. You watch in silence as she boards. She doesn't stride like the brutes you've seen on other ships. She glides. Her robe is deep blue, embroidered with silver waves. Her eyes, small, sharp, and unbothered. She doesn't carry a sword. She doesn't need one. You blink, and she's already halfway down the deck, speaking quietly to a lieutenant, eyes scanning everything. You stand straighter. Everyone does. This is your first real glimpse of the woman the world will later mythologize as Ching Shih, though that wasn't her birth name. Born Shi Yang sometime around 1775, she worked in a floating brothel in Canton, likely from her teens. The clientele? A mix of merchants, smugglers, and corrupt officials, perfect for overhearing whispers and secrets. She learned fast, watched harder, and stored information the way some people store coins. Then Zheng Yi happened, a pirate captain with a sharp mind and a sharp jaw. He didn't just take her as a concubine, he married her, which was rare. Even rarer, he let her help command. Historians still argue whether that was out of love or cunning, but the result is the same. When he died in a storm in 1807, She stepped into power, fast and clean, before anyone could challenge her. Back on deck, you start hauling nets under the sun's first rays. The sea is calm, but the tension is high. Today's the inspection, a rotation of ships across the red flag fleet, a methodical tour by the commander herself, and she's watching everything. You're assigned to the sail team. You don't know what you're doing, but a girl named Lee with wind-chapped cheeks mutters instructions fast enough to keep you alive. The rope burns your palms. The sun blisters your neck. But somehow, your lines are tight, your knots hold, and no one yells at you. In pirate terms, this is a glowing review. Near mid-morning, the commander stands at the helm. She raises a hand. Everyone freezes. Then she speaks. Not loudly, but clearly. "There is no place for laziness here," she says, voice smooth as polished jade. "No place for theft. We are many, but we move as one." And then, she smiles. It's barely a flicker, but Lee elbows you in the ribs, eyes wide. "That's the first time I've seen her do that," she whispers. You grin through cracked lips. You're still not quite sure what just happened, but you're sure it was important. Later, you learn more about how the Red Flag Fleet works. It's not chaos. It's law. A pirate code, written, distributed, and enforced by her hand. Break the rules, and you face punishment that makes most Navy men go pale. Desertion? Death? Assaulting a fellow crew member? Death? Taking your own loot without registering it? Yep, also death. But for those who follow, there's equality. Wages are divided. Food is rationed fairly. Even women, rare among most pirate crews, serve in combat roles. You see some now? Sword-hilted and sunburnt, shouting at a group of men twice their size. No one dares talk back. Here's your fringe fact of the day. The Red Flag Fleet even had provisions for women captives. Unlike many pirates of the era, this fleet forbade rape. If a woman was taken prisoner and a crewman assaulted her, executed on the spot. If she chose to marry her captor, fine, but she got a cut of the spoils. If not, she was returned, untouched. That kind of code wasn't just rare, it was radical. You sit on a crate chewing dried squid later that afternoon, brain fried by sun and salt, when Lee plops down beside you. She doesn't need to shout, she says suddenly. Doesn't need to kill in front of us. She makes everyone think. You nod. Is that why no one challenges her? Lee snorts. Who says they don't? They just don't last long. Turns out, a few men had tried. Some thought they'd take command after Zheng Yi died. Some thought a woman couldn't lead. Some thought they had more ships, more weapons, more support. They were all wrong. Some were bribed. Some were outmaneuvered. A few were poisoned. The last one? He vanished during a night voyage, and his ship was found gently drifting, crew asleep, not a drop of blood spilled. Historians still argue whether she personally ordered any deaths, but the results? Undeniable. By sundown, you're back at port. The commander has left for another ship. The tension ebbs like the tide, replaced by exhaustion and low laughter. A group of men pass a jug of something fermented. You pass on the offer. You're too tired to be curious. You stretch out on a woven mat under a canvas tarp. The stars come out, pinpricks above sails and smoke. You're sore, salt-streaked, and sun-numbed, but you feel something blooming in your chest. Not pride, not yet, but the beginning of belonging. You don't get much sleep that night. Not because of the creaking hull or the snoring deckmate 3 feet away who sounds like a pig choking on a bamboo flute. No, it's your brain. It won't stop racing, circling the same thought again and again. How did she, a brothel worker, become the most powerful pirate in the world? You ask Lee in the morning. She doesn't answer right away, just squints at the horizon, chewing on a piece of dried mango like it holds secrets. Ching Shih was clever, she says eventually, but she was terrifying. In the smart way? The story is well known among the fleet, but the details are slippery. Some say she was abducted from her floating brothel by pirates. Others say she chose to leave, sealing her fate with a calculated smile and a few whispered secrets. What's agreed on is this. Around 1801, Ching Shih married her, and that was strange. Pirates didn't marry brothel workers. They took them, kept them, sometimes passed them around. But a formal wedding, with shared power and signed documents, that meant something. Some say she only agreed to marry if Ching Shih signed a contract giving her co-ownership of his command. Others say it was his idea, that he saw her mind as a weapon and wanted it aimed at his enemies. Either way, she didn't just marry into piracy, she annexed it. Together, they consolidated several major pirate gangs into one fleet, the Red Flag Fleet. It was a rare alliance in a world full of knives and grudges. But, under their combined rule, the chaos found direction. They instituted written codes, organized ships by color and function, and created chain of command systems that made the Chinese Navy look like a flock of geese chasing ghosts. But then, in 1807, Ching Shih died suddenly, probably during a storm near Vietnam. And that's where history usually takes a breath, because this is the part where, if she'd been anyone else, Ching Shih would have vanished, relegated to a footnote, replaced, forgotten. But she didn't vanish. She accelerated. Here's your quirky tidbit. Within days of Ching Shih's death, she made a move that still leaves historians slack-jawed. She called for a meeting of all the high-ranking captains, every ambitious man with a ship and ego the size of a sea monster, and somehow convinced them to accept her leadership. How? One key piece was Chung Po Tsai, her late husband's adopted son, a handsome, ambitious young pirate who some say was more than just a son, possibly a lover, possibly a pawn, possibly both. She quickly aligned herself with him. Some sources say they married, others claim it was strictly political, and through him, secured the loyalty of Ching Shih's old crew. And then, she did what most widows don't. She took charge of the paperwork. You laugh when you hear that part, but it's true. One of her most powerful tools was a ledger, a detailed record of ships, supplies, loot divisions, and captains. She understood that control wasn't just about swords and cannons. It was about records, systems, data. She ran the fleet like a warlord, but also like a CEO. By now, you're starting to realize she didn't become the pirate queen after Ching Shih died. She'd already been running the show behind the scenes. His death just moved her name to the top of the scroll. Later that day, you helped deliver supplies to a mid-sized junk bearing the green flag, a patrol unit responsible for overseeing smaller pirate vessels. As you pass crates of dried fish and grain down the line, you overhear a story from a grizzled old sailor with a face like a weathered boot. She knew who owed who, he says, shaking his head in admiration. It knew which captain was sleeping with which governor's wife. It knew who skimmed from their crew's share and who'd hide gold in their boots. You glance at Lee. She nods. She watched. Always, you ask. Was she cruel? Lee pauses. No, just precise. And that, perhaps, is what made her dangerous. She didn't rule through fear alone, though there was plenty of that. She ruled through knowledge, through a network of spies, whisperers, former lovers, bought officials, and street children who could vanish into alleyways the way smoke vanishes into air. She knew everything, including how to make herself irreplaceable. Back on the dock, as the sun bakes your scalp and your fingers turn to blisters, you start to picture her not just as a woman, but as a system, a living, breathing organism of power, one that doesn't need brute strength to survive, just leverage, lots and lots of leverage. Historians still debate whether she truly loved Zheng Yi, or if he was simply the ladder she climbed to reach the helm. But whatever her motivations, the legacy is clear. She didn't inherit power. She absorbed it, refined it, and then multiplied it. And now? Now she rules the coast. At night, you lie awake under a fishing net, listening to waves slap gently against the hull. Your mind spins with images, red sails, paper scrolls, daggers tucked into embroidered sleeves. You're not sure where this is going. You're not even sure who you are in this story anymore. A crewmate, a witness, a footnote, but you are certain of one thing. This woman is not done, and neither are you. You wake to a slap, not a mean one, more like a damp fish smacking your cheek. Lee's grinning. Up, she says, already tying back her hair with a rag that used to be red. You're coming to court. You sit up, groggy, sunburned, and deeply confused. Court? She nods. Fleet. Court. Discipline day. You assume this is pirate code for something like, we all get rum and yell about rules. But no. It's very literal. By the time you reach the main deck of the command ship, the benches are filled. At least 100 people sit in silence, all facing a small wooden platform near the stern. On it sits a stool and her, the commander, Ching Shih. No ornamentation today, just black robes, bare feet, a single scroll resting on her lap. She doesn't speak, doesn't have to. A lieutenant reads the charges, clear, concise, terrifying. Theft of a crew share, falsified reporting of captured goods, unauthorized looting of a merchant ship, assault. Each name is called. Each accused steps forward, head bowed. They're not dragged. They walk, because they know this is serious, formal, legal in its own brutal way. Lee leans close and whispers, "This is what keeps us from killing each other." You realize you're not watching a pirate crew. You're watching a government. This isn't the Wild West of the seas. This is a structured, rule-based confederation with codes and protocols. You're part of a floating city-state, one that floats, yes, but floats with purpose. One of the men pleads. He didn't mean to pocket that silver. He thought he'd return it. He didn't touch the girl. It was an accident. Ching Shih listens, still doesn't speak. When he finishes, she gestures slightly. The lieutenant reads a verdict. Guilty. The punishment, 100 lashes, distributed over 10 days, plus loss of all loot for 2 months. No execution. Not today. The man bows and steps aside, visibly shaking. He's alive. He'll stay that way if he learns. Then, a different case. This one more serious. A sailor took a hostage, an official's daughter from a captured vessel, held her, touched her, The air changes. It gets colder. No discussion. No plea. Ching Shih raises one hand. Execution. A gasp ripples through the crowd, but not shock. More like a collective exhale of relief. The code is clear. The rule was broken. The response is swift and final. You shiver. The rest of the day. Your tasks feel heavier. The ropes dig deeper. The rice tastes bland. You're not scared exactly, but aware. Aware that every action you take is being watched, judged, measured. Still, there's a strange comfort in that. Fairness. Even, you've seen injustice before. Officials who took bribes. Bosses who demanded favors in return for pay. But here, on this strange, floating world, there are rules. Written, shared, enforced. And you get the sense that this structure, this pirate code, is what holds the whole Red Flag fleet together. With tens of thousands of pirates across hundreds of ships, chaos is always a breath away. But order, this sharp, disciplined order, is her masterpiece. Here's your mainstream historical fact for today. The Red Flag fleet at its height consisted of roughly 300 ships and over 70,000 pirates. That's more than the navies of most countries at the time. And it wasn't just a gang. It was a functioning society with divisions, job roles, economic distribution, and justice. Back on the deck that evening, you sit near a barrel as Lee carves symbols into the wood with a broken knife tip. We're not pirates, she says casually. We're an empire. You chuckle. An empire with no land? She grins. Water's easier to defend. There's some truth to that. The sea changes every day. It's a living wall of defense, a shifting kingdom. Land can be invaded. But here, you move before the enemy finds you. And enemies? Oh, there are plenty. From gossip passed around the fire, you learn about the mainland government, frustrated, outgunned, humiliated, about the coastal governors, half-bribed, half-terrified, about the foreign powers eyeing the region, Portuguese, British, Dutch. None can quite figure out how to handle a woman who doesn't behave the way they're used to. One whispered tale says the emperor himself once issued a secret bounty. Anyone who could kill or capture Ching Shih would be given a lifetime pension and a palace near the Forbidden City. But no one took it. Not seriously. Because how do you assassinate someone who knows your plans before you do? Historians still argue whether that bounty was real or just sea legend, but it tells you everything about her aura. Later that week, you help repaint the ship's emblem. The golden phoenix is flaking, sun-bleached and bruised by salt. As you brush on the new gold, you can't help but wonder, is this bird rising or already mid-flight? You ask Lee. She laughs. Quiet. She says we're not meant to rise or fall, just survive. And that's the thing. For all her brilliance, Ching Shih isn't out here making declarations or sculpting statues. She's building a system designed not for glory, but for endurance. No monument. No throne. No dynasty. Just rules. Structure. A way to exist in a world that never wanted you to. You finish your painting as the sun dips low, gilding the water with warmth. A few deckhands hum a song you don't know. Someone tosses you a steamed bun. It's still warm. You chew slowly, watching the sky turn lavender. This isn't the life you expected, but you're starting to see why so many stayed, why so many fought for it, why so many called her not pirate, but protector. You wake in the dark to the sound of shouting, not angry shouting, urgent shouting, sharp orders, running feet, the distinct boom of cannon fire rolling across the water like distant thunder. You're on your feet before your mind has time to catch up. Lee throws a belt of tools at you. "Storm drill!" she yells over the noise. "Move!" You stumble after her, hard in your throat, as the ship lists gently under your feet. The wind is already rising. Above, the sky looks like someone spilled ink across it. Clouds churned thick and low. The moon swallowed. It's not raining yet, but it will. Except, this isn't just a storm. Also a betrayal, Lee says grimly, as you haul a sail with trembling arms. Some captain tried to flee, took 2 ships, thought the dark would cover them. You blink. He deserted? Lee nods. With silver, maybe more, he'll never make it. And suddenly, the tension hits you full force. This isn't just a weather drill. This is strategy and discipline under pressure. Because when you command a floating empire of pirates, weather isn't your only enemy. Loyalty is. The boats are already in motion. Orders are barked in multiple dialects: Cantonese, Hakka, Teochew, and somehow they all know what to do. The sails are reefed. The oars drop. Lanterns are doused to keep ships hidden in the dark. It's like watching a flock of birds move as one, except these birds have teeth and cannonballs. The wind shrieks now, sharp and cold, whipping salt spray across your face. Your hands are raw on the rope, knuckles burning. Still, you hold. Far off, you see a flicker, 2 lanterns where there should be none, then 3, then the flash of a cannon. Found him, someone mutters. Idiot lit a fire to cook. The red flag fleet doesn't send the flagship, just 2 pursuit boats, fast, lean, hungry. You watch as they vanish into the storm's mouth. Then you wait. The rain hits half an hour later. Sheets of it, pounding so hard you wonder if the sky cracked. You're soaked, freezing, half blind, but you don't stop working. No one does. When the storm breaks just before dawn, the sky is a bruised pink. The sea has calmed, and the missing boats, they're back, 1 in tow, crew tied and blindfolded, the betraying captain nowhere in sight. Jumped, someone says, or was pushed. Ching Shih doesn't speak that morning. She stands at the bow, robe flapping like wings. The message is clear. Betrayal won't be tolerated, not even during a storm. Later, as the deck is cleaned and the sun climbs higher, you sit with Lee eating cold rice and half a salted egg. Your hands tremble slightly, not from fear, from the adrenaline crash. That was, you start. Lee nods. Normal. She explains that the Red Flag Fleet is trained constantly for disaster, natural or human. Every crew member knows their post in a typhoon. Every officer knows how to execute formation shifts at sea. Because the ocean is chaos, and the only way to survive it is with ruthless preparation. Here's today's mainstream historical fact. The South China Sea is notorious for sudden storms and monsoons, especially in summer. For pirates, weather was as much a threat as any navy. Ching Shih's fleet was unusually resilient, not because of luck, but because of drills. Drills, and more drills. You soon learn that weather is a weapon too. Sometimes the fleet wants a storm. Under cover of rain and fog, they raid lightly defended harbors. Sometimes they fake distress signals, raise a tattered sail, list their ship sideways, and lure merchant vessels in close before striking. There's a genius to it. A playbook you can't find in any admiral's library. And that's the fringe tidbit of the day. Legend has it that Ching Shih consulted a team of Taoist astrologers who advised on tides. weather patterns, and even lucky days for raiding. Did it help? Hard to say, but it sure helped morale. You begin to respect the sea in new ways, its cruelty, its beauty, its potential for revenge. One night, you're on watch duty. The moon is high, the water silver and calm. The ship rocks like a cradle. You hear someone humming near the stern, an old tune about fishermen who married dragons and drowned in love. You wonder what keeps the commander awake. She doesn't sleep like the others. She walks the deck late, sometimes with Chung Po Tsai, sometimes alone, always observing. You wonder if she's waiting for something, or watching for a betrayal that hasn't come yet. Historians still argue about how much of her power came from charisma versus sheer paranoia. Did she trust her lieutenants, or did she just have more dirt on them than they had on her? Either way, her reign held, and that's not nothing. The next day, repairs begin. You spend hours sealing cracks in the hull with resin and cloth. It smells awful. Your hands sting, but it's quiet work, and you welcome the silence. You think about storms, not just the ones in the sky, but the ones inside people, the panic, the ambition, the quiet urge to jump ship and try your luck elsewhere. You understand now why Ching Shih drilled the fleet like a general, not just to fight the navy, but to keep the chaos inside from breaking everything apart. You finish your shift with a bowl of fish congee and collapse beside a stack of coiled ropes. The sun warms your wet hair. The sails creak gently above you. You're tired, so tired, but safe. For now. You wake to bells, not alarm bells, celebration bells. They clang from one end of the harbor to the other, bouncing off water and sails in your aching skull. The smell of garlic chive dumplings is already in the air. Someone plays a bamboo flute. Someone else, less musically inclined, bangs two pans together. Lee finds you dazed, half-dressed, brushing sand from your ear. Big haul last week. Commander's hosting a market day. You blink. A pirate market? Lee nods. Like that's the most natural thing in the world. Time to see what 70,000 pirates do when they're not looting. The Red Flag Fleet isn't just ships anymore. It's a mobile economy, a floating network of trade, gossip, and resource management. On designated market days, ships anchor in a crescent formation, creating a pop-up village on water. Rowboats flit between decks like bees between flowers, delivering goods, gossip, and sometimes goats. You're given a short list of tasks. Fetch rope from the supply barge, deliver salted squid to the command galley, and, if there's time, scout out the weapons merchant who apparently got his hands on Portuguese gunpowder. You paddle a small dinghy through the maze of ships. Each has its own character. Some are painted bright green, their hulls covered in dragon motifs. Others are dull gray. All business. One ship sells only seaweed. Another is run entirely by teenage girls who out-haggle you before you can even say hello. And then there's the flagship, larger than you remembered, now with fresh gold trim and fluttering silk banners. Ching Shih stands near the railing, arms crossed, watching the whole operation unfold with the calm of a queen inspecting her domain. You don't approach, you just watch. Here's your mainstream fact of the day. The Red Flag Fleet was divided into several color-coded squadrons. Red, black, white, green, blue, and yellow, each with its own leaders, areas of control, and ship types. At its peak, the fleet commanded over 800 vessels. Not a rogue band of outlaws, but a structured, multi-tiered command system. able to enforce not just discipline, but trade regulations. This is what you see now. Ships bartering not just gold, but manpower, goods, and information. One vessel offers pearls in exchange for a promise of backup in next month's raid. Another negotiates rice for iron nails. You meet a man with 2 teeth and a terrifying laugh who claims to be a contractual pirate. He doesn't raid, he leases his boat to those who do. You laugh until you realize he's serious. Lee tells you later this kind of shadow economy was critical. The Chinese Navy couldn't chase what it couldn't understand. Half the time, pirate fleets were trading peacefully in villages whose officials had already been bribed. Smuggling networks blurred the line between pirate and merchant. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some pirates even carried double sets of papers, one pirate ID and one merchant pass. If questioned, they could pretend to be fishing vessels, often flashing counterfeit seals purchased in the floating market. You pause on a supply barge piled high with stolen textiles, silks from the north, rough-spun cotton from India, even wool, oddly enough, from a British ship that allegedly got lost. You finger a bolt of indigo-dyed cloth and wonder what merchant will wear it next, clueless to its journey. Suddenly, Lee grabs your sleeve. You have to see this. She pulls you toward the center of the ship cluster, where a small platform has been set up. Performers gather, musicians, dancers, a storyteller in a scarlet robe. Pirates lean over railings to watch, bowls of fried octopus in hand. You settle in as the storyteller begins, a ballad about a general's wife who dressed as a man, led an army, and died in battle with no one knowing her true name. The crowd is rapt. She's talking about Ching Shih. You whisper. Lee grins. Sort of. Sometimes it's her, sometimes Mulan, sometimes both. Doesn't matter. That's when it hits you. The myth is already blooming. Even as she lives and leads, stories are splintering off from her, taking root in song and legend. Some are true, others enhanced. But the point is, people want to believe, and belief, you're learning, is more powerful than canons. Historians still argue whether Ching Shih's power lay more in her tactics or in her image. Was she truly unbeatable, or did the belief in her invincibility become a weapon in itself? The market winds down as the sun slips low, trade quiets, boats return to position, the cook fires start up, sending coils of smoke into the dusky air. You sit with Lee and 3 others around a pot of rice and dried fish. There's laughter, elbow nudges, a few made-up sea riddles. You feel something you haven't in weeks, normal, even on the run, even in a life built on plunder and risk. The market day gives you the illusion of permanence, a world where pirates have policies, where black sails wave over honest exchanges, where stories are currency and legends are negotiable. You stretch out on the deck as darkness fully falls. Crickets chirp somewhere nearby. How did crickets get on a boat, and the stars blink overhead? You think about the red sails, the fleet, the woman who holds it all together without raising her voice. And you start to wonder what happens when the sea runs out of places to hide. By now, you've figured out something important. The real business of piracy doesn't happen on the waves, it happens on land, which is why, a week after market day, you find yourself stepping onto the dock of a sleepy coastal village, dressed in clothes that scream not a pirate, even louder than your terrible acting skills. You're there to deliver fish, which is code for silver salted opium and persuasive whispers. Lee walks beside you, hair combed, sleeves long, posture demure. She looks like someone's niece sent to the market, not a pirate spy. She's better at this than you. Smiles at a passing merchant, bows to a minor official, murmurs something about her uncle's trading boat. You pass temples with curling eaves, courtyards shaded by persimmon trees, and the occasional guard who couldn't care less about your presence as long as you hand over a pouch of coins. This is what no one tells you about piracy. Half of it is admin. You're led into a tea house. The smell of jasmine and fermented shrimp greets you at the door. Inside, a man with long fingernails and the bland smile of someone who charges triple for discretion pours tea with elaborate flicks of the wrist. He doesn't look up. Lee hands him a scroll. He weighs it in his palm. That scroll? It's not a love letter. It's a list of which ships are coming to port, what cargo they'll confiscate, and how much the local governor will pretend not to see in exchange for hush money and possibly a box of rare plums. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Corruption in early 19th century China was rampant, especially along the coast. Many local officials turned a blind eye to piracy in exchange for bribes, protection, or simply because they didn't have the means to resist. The Red Flag Fleet didn't just conquer by force. It wormed its way into the bureaucracy like salt in wood. You leave the tea house with a nod from the long-nailed man. That means the deal is done. Back on the street, you see the ripple of your presence. Villagers peek from behind laundry lines. Shopkeepers offer discounts with suspicious smiles. You realize it's not just fear that greases the wheels here. It's familiarity. These people know the pirates, grew up with them, did business with them, maybe married into them. Lee whispers. The commander says it's better to be a shadow than a sword. And that's how it works. Ching Shih doesn't need to burn down villages to keep them compliant. She just makes sure the right people get gifts, the wrong people disappear quietly, and everyone else gets richer the longer they play along. You pass a shrine on your way out. Someone has left 3 oranges and a folded letter on the steps. You ask Lee what it says. She squints. Looks like a request for protection from a merchant worried about bandits. You laugh. Aren't we the bandits? Lee shrugs. We're reliable. That's your quirky tidbit of the day. In many coastal towns, pirates were seen not as criminals, but as alternative law enforcers. If a local bandit gang was terrorizing a village, people might send word to the Red Flag Fleet instead of the government. The pirates would come, deal with the problem, and sometimes even stay for tea. For a fee, of course. Back aboard your junk, you help inventory the new supplies. Fresh rice, gunpowder, medicinal herbs, and, curiously, several bolts of silk embroidered with peonies. Apparently some deals are sealed with luxury, not loot. You're starting to understand how the commander holds her power, not with swords, with systems, influence, quiet control. Historians still argue whether her success came more from her naval dominance or her land-based network. But seeing it up close, you know the answer is both. Her empire doesn't stop at the shore. It extends into city walls, government halls, and merchant ledgers. That evening, the crew holds a dinner to celebrate a successful mission. It's not lavish, just rice, fish, and plum wine, but the mood is high. Someone brings out a 3-stringed lute. Someone else starts a game involving dice and cursing in at least 4 dialects. You sit with Lee under a lantern strung from the mast. She passes you a cup. You sip, It tastes like fire and fermented peaches. You think we'll ever get caught? You ask. Suddenly serious. She thinks, then shrugs. Maybe, but not today. You nod. Above you, the stars are soft and scattered. The sails flap gently. Somewhere below, the sea rocks your ship like a lullaby. And in the dark corners of the world, behind ink-stained scrolls and teacups full of secrets, Ching Shih is winning, not loudly, not with flags, but with every whispered agreement sealed under lantern light. You're standing knee-deep in salt, not on a beach, but in a warehouse just off a quiet inlet, stacking burlap sacks filled with gray-white crystals of dried seawater. It crunches underfoot like gravel. Your arms ache, your back aches, even your eyelashes ache. But the pay for this run is good, and you're learning something valuable. Salt, it turns out, is worth more than silver. This isn't the glamorous side of piracy, if there is one. No swords, no sea battles, no dramatic speeches under full moon satsam. Just salt, stacked high, guarded by 3 teenage pirates who look like they're trying to stay awake while holding spears. Lee leans against a pillar, brushing sand off her shirt. People always think pirates make their fortune from treasure, she says, but the real money's in boring stuff. Here's your mainstream historical fact of the day. Salt was a government monopoly in Qing Dynasty China. Strictly regulated, heavily taxed, and absolutely essential to life, especially for preserving fish, meat, and vegetables. Pirates who intercepted salt shipments weren't just raiding cargo, they were disrupting the entire economic bloodstream of the empire. You look at the crates around you, some labeled as dried fish, others as lotus root, all hiding contraband salt. You've helped load 5 different boats today, each bound for a different town, each one with a paid-off official waiting. This one's going to Zhenhai, Lee mutters, handing you a forged document. Inspector Liu thinks he's getting mushrooms. He'll pretend very hard not to notice they clink. You tuck the paper under a flap of tarp and nod. You're starting to see the deeper layers of this operation. The Red Flag Fleet isn't just stealing, it's distributing, undermining state control by giving people what they need, and cutting the government out of the deal. Why salt, though, you ask? Lee raises an eyebrow. Because everyone needs it, even the people trying to kill us. And that's the part no one outside the fleet really understands. You're not just living in opposition to the Empire, you're creating a shadow version of it, with your own routes, your own stamps, your own flow of goods and services. Today's quirky tidbit? There were entire villages that specialized in salt washing, scrubbing off the official government dye from illegally harvested salt so it could be passed off as legal. These weren't pirate havens, they were just practical folks making a living. The line between crime and commerce has always been blurry here. By afternoon, your hands are raw and your clothes are stiff with salt dust. But you're moving with confidence now. You can read manifests, spot double-stamped cargo logs, recognize the subtle symbols etched into crates, 1 swirl for Red Flag Fleet property, 2 for freelance merchants paying pirate tolls. Yes, that's a thing. Tolls. You don't have to be in the fleet to use pirate routes, just pay the fee and stay in line. It's brilliant. You and Lee catch a ride back to your ship on a small skiff, crewed by 2 boys with matching earrings and 0 interest in conversation. They drop you off and vanish into the dusk. That night, under the dim glow of hanging lanterns, the crew gathers to divide the profits. There's no shouting, no fighting, just orderly counting. 10 parts, 2 go to ship maintenance, 1 to the injured, 1 to the widow's fund, 1 to the commander, and 5 are divided among the crew. It's not perfect, but it's fair. As you pocket your share, mostly copper coins and a small jade bead, you feel it again. This isn't piracy, it's governance. Historians still argue whether the Red Flag Fleet should be considered a state, but when you look at how wealth is managed, how systems are enforced, how trade is regulated, you begin to wonder what really defines a government in the first place. Later, as you rest near the stern with your back to a barrel of rice, Lee sits beside you. She never even touches the money, Lee says, out of nowhere. The commander doesn't handle the coins, doesn't haggle the bribes. You glance over. Then who does? Lee shrugs. Clerks, bookkeepers, ex-accountants from Macau. One even used to work in a silk tax office. You chuckle. What, did she steal an entire bureaucracy? Lee grins. Sort of. She gave them better wages. And that, you realize, might be the biggest twist of all. Ching Shih didn't just steal ships. She stole systems, pulled educated people into her orbit, offered them freedom, purpose, and, most importantly, a cut. That's how she turned a fleet of bandits into a functioning network, one where smuggling wasn't just tolerated, it was optimized. As the sea laps gently at the hull and a breeze stirs the lanterns, you close your eyes and picture it. Salt caravans replacing tax routes, pirate currency flowing smoother than imperial coin, and a brothel worker turned strategist who saw a failing empire and made her own. You smile into the dark, because for all the mess and blisters and half-fermented fish guts, you're starting to believe something dangerous. Maybe this isn't just survival anymore. Maybe this is working. You're on lookout duty tonight, which means you're perched on a damp crate with a spyglass pressed to your face, trying not to blink too hard every time a moth smacks into your forehead. The moon is bright, the sea glassy and silent. You hear laughter from another ship, probably someone cheating at dice again. But your focus isn't on the fleet tonight, it's on the horizon, because rumor has it, the Navy is coming. Again, Lee appears at your side like a whisper. She hands you a steamed bun, still warm. Admiral Sun's been reassigned, she says casually. The new one? Young, too clean, wants to impress someone. You chew in silence. It's not your first brush with the government navy, and it won't be the last. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Qing dynasty struggled badly to contain piracy, especially in southern waters. They had fewer ships, underpaid sailors, and massive corruption among coastal officials. More than once, entire naval patrols simply didn't show up to battles, but Ching Shih, she showed up every time. As the night deepens, you remember the last time a Navy squadron came calling. It was 2 months ago, near the Pearl River Delta. 5 government ships, flying banners so bright they looked like wedding decorations, sailed in at dawn. They were met by 15 pirate junks, and not a cannon fired. Instead, Ching Shih sent a messenger boat, under a white flag, with a gift, a box of tea, some silver, and a polite note requesting non-engagement. The admiral, probably half asleep and half terrified, turned around. No one was killed, no shots exchanged, but the message was clear. We control this water. We don't need to fight you. This is what surprises you the most. The longer you stay, how often battles are avoided, how many wars are won without drawing swords. Still, not everyone gets the memo. Around mid-morning the next day, the lookout on the forward mast spots sails, navy sails, gray, square, slow. 4 ships, maybe 5. The fleet doesn't panic. It doesn't even raise an alarm. You feel the quiet ripple of readiness, like a cat stretching before a pounce. You're assigned to observation duty again, this time with Lee and 2 other crew. You row toward a small rocky island just outside the bay and watch through spyglasses as the Navy ships form a cautious line. They're looking for pirates. They just don't realize they're being watched by the pirates they're looking for. One ship fires a warning shot. It lands half a mile from anything useful. One of your companions mutters, "They're guessing." That's your quirky tidbit of the day. Ching Shih often trained her lookouts to signal with kites. Different colors and shapes told the fleet about weather, ship movements, and incoming threats. From your rocky outpost, you spot a yellow kite rising from the command junk. That means no engagement, observe only. But still, you feel the tension. Because some captains are itching for a fight, and this new admiral, he doesn't seem to know the dance. He moves his ships into a tighter formation and drops anchor, sends a rowboat ashore. A man in silk boots and entirely too much pomade steps onto the beach with a scroll. "This is gonna be good," Lee mutters. Back on your ship, the fleet's answer comes not with cannonballs, but with precision. One small junk drifts forward, flying a yellow flag of parley. 2 musicians on board begin playing a flute and drum duet. A young woman in formal robes reads a prepared statement through a speaking trumpet. It's basically pirate legalese. "You are in restricted fishing waters. Kindly leave or pay the fleet's anchorage tax." It's so absurdly official sounding that you snort. But it works. The admiral's messenger looks flustered. He tries to argue. The girl holds her ground after 20 minutes of back and forth posturing. The Navy retreats again. Historians still debate whether these negotiations were staged or genuinely spontaneous, but from where you're standing, you see it clearly. Ching Shih's greatest weapon isn't firepower, it's authority, the kind that makes even governments hesitate. You row back as the sun begins to set, the sea flushed gold and pink, the crew's already lighting lanterns and sharing dinner. Someone's roasting sweet potatoes on a tin grate. The smell makes your stomach howl. You settle in beside the anchor post, bowl in hand, while Lee pokes at the fire with a stick. "Why don't they just attack us?" you ask. She shrugs. "They're afraid." Of us? Of the mess. If they win, they'll have to manage this. You laugh. And then you stop. Because she's right. It's not just the firepower that protects the Red Flag fleet. It's the scale, the complexity, the fact that dismantling this operation would mean replacing it. And no one wants that job. Not the Navy. Not the courts. Not even the Emperor. As the stars blink to life overhead, you lie back against a coiled rope, heart still buzzing from the day's tension. But it's a strange kind of thrill, like watching a tiger lie down next to a lamb, and realizing the lamb is the one in charge. The sea rocks you gently. A distant flute drifts across the water, soft and slow, and you fall asleep wondering how many other emperors have had to negotiate with pirates behind closed doors. The smell of smoke hits you before you hear the cannon. You're dozing in the mid-morning sun, lulled by the slap of waves and the rhythmic scraping of someone scrubbing the deck, when a dull boom rolls over the water like a god clearing his throat. Then another, and another. You sit up, blinking, heart thumping. This isn't a drill. By the time you reach the stern, half the crew is already leaning over the railings, eyes squinting toward the horizon. In the distance, dark specks bloom against the pale blue sky, puffs of smoke rising from the mouth of the Pearl River. Lee shoves a telescope into your hands. Portuguese, she mutters. Probably from Macau. Ah, yes, the Europeans. You peer through the glass and catch your first glimpse of the galleons, massive, wooden monsters bristling with cannons. Their sails are stiff, painted with red crosses. They're not navy. They're not merchants either. They're something in between. Armed traders, privateers, imperial meddlers. Macanese militia, Lee clarifies. They like to play hero when they think we're distracted. Here's your mainstream historical fact of the day. Macau, a Portuguese colony at the time, frequently clashed with Chinese pirates operating near its shipping lanes. While not a full military power, Macau maintained its own armed defenses, including ships sent to challenge Ching Shih's dominance when tensions flared. And today, tensions are definitely flaring. Ching Shih doesn't flinch. She stands barefoot at the bow of the command junk, robes fluttering, hair tied high with a silver pin. No shouting, no panic, just 3 sharp hand gestures, and suddenly the fleet is moving, not to attack, to surround. This isn't some Hollywood boarding party. You're not swinging from ropes or biting daggers between your teeth. You're watching a choreographed naval ballet, one ship at a time. The red flag fleet spreads out, forming a silent crescent around the incoming galleons. No drums, no chants. Just the creak of hulls and the groan of rope. The Portuguese ships hesitate. They were expecting chaos, smoke, a fight they could win, or at least justify. Instead, they find themselves boxed in by dozens of junks, all eerily quiet, bobbing gently like sharks at rest. You're on one of the outer vessels now, watching from behind stacked barrels of tar. Your captain mutters curses under his breath, not in fear, impatience. No one likes waiting with cannons loaded. Then, a signal. 2 quick flares from the flagship. A single junk approaches the Portuguese lead ship, flying a white banner. A negotiator stands at the bow with arms wide, shouting something in Portuguese. You don't catch it, but it ends with a familiar gesture, a scroll raised, then dropped into the sea. Lee leans over. Last week, a Portuguese patrol stole 3 of our salt ships. That scroll says, give them back or sink. A pause. Then, to everyone's astonishment, one of the galleons signals surrender. The other 2 follow suit within minutes. They've done the math. The red flag fleet outnumbers them 5-1, and if they fire the first shot, no one's coming to save them. Today's quirky tidbit. It's said that Ching Shih won multiple standoffs without violence simply by using numerical intimidation and impeccable timing. She'd position ships to block escape routes, cut off supply lines, or shadow vessels until their crews panicked and gave up without a fight. The Portuguese ships lower their cannons and allow 2 red flag boats to board. No violence, just paperwork. The lost cargo is returned. A small crate of opium is handed over as a fine, a little face saving on both sides. And just like that, the European menace sails off, bruised but intact. Historians still argue about how much of this was orchestrated in advance. Was there a prior deal, a payment to certain officials, Or was this simply the pirate queen proving, once again, that she owned the sea, and that foreign powers were guests at best? Either way, you've just witnessed something wild. Ching Shih faced down Western gunships without firing a shot. You float back to port in stunned silence. The crew is buzzing, nervous energy without release. You half expect someone to yell, or drink, or light a celebratory fire, but instead, they just go back to work, like it's normal. Like staring down European warships and making them blink first is just another Tuesday. Later that night, you find Lee on the upper deck, legs dangling over the side, staring out into the black water. The stars are sharp tonight, the sea, unusually still. She's going to win everything, you whisper, unsure if it's a question or a prophecy. Lee doesn't answer at first. She doesn't care about winning, she says finally. She cares about control. There's something chilling in that. Not evil, not even cruel, just focused. A mind built like a trap, spring-loaded, calculating, impossible to read until it's already closed. You wonder what her endgame is, whether she plans to retire, to burn it all down, to disappear, or if she's simply playing a game so long and complex that everyone else forgot they're on the board. You lie back, spine pressed to warm wood, and close your eyes. In the quiet, you hear distant waves, a sail creaking gently, someone sharpening a blade below deck, and you think, if she can scare Portugal into silence, what else might she do? You're scrubbing barnacles off the hull when the opium arrives. It comes quietly, no drums, no shouting, just a small junk gliding in under a neutral flag, hull heavy with crates that don't rattle. The crew unloading it wears merchant robes, too clean, too polite. You've learned to spot the signs, the way they avoid eye contact, how no one asks what's inside the boxes. You already know. Lee appears beside you, hands on hips, watching the cargo roll onto deck. New route, she says. New profits. New enemies. She says it like it's the weather. Unavoidable. Shifting. You don't get involved with the actual trade. That's for officers and scribes. But you help carry one of the crates. And, as you do, you feel the weight of it, not just physically, but morally. It's heavy in a way that silver and salt never were. Because this time, the red flag fleet isn't just bending a corrupt system, it's feeding a wound. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the early 1800s, foreign traders, especially the British, were funneling opium into China at an alarming rate. It was illegal, but profitable, and as government control faltered, pirates, smugglers, and rogue merchants alike found ways to profit. The Red Flag Fleet, already running covert trade routes, was perfectly positioned to get a cut, and they did. Opium didn't just mean money, it meant leverage. Bribing officials became easier when their sons were addicted. Paying guards to look away got cheaper. It was an ugly edge to an already sharp blade. You sit with Lee later, eating cold noodles under the quarterdeck awning. You ask, "Do you think she regrets it?" "Who?" "The commander." Lee picks at a sprig of scallion. "Regret isn't useful." You chew in silence. That's the thing about Ching Shih. She doesn't do what's moral. She does what works. And sometimes what works is ugly. Still, she draws lines. The Red Flag Fleet doesn't allow use among its own. It's in the code. Get caught with opium in your bunk, and you're thrown off the ship, if you're lucky. And today's quirky tidbit, It's said that Ching Shih had a personal rule. She never allowed opium in the same room as her food. Even her enemies noted her discipline. One Portuguese source described her as strictly sober and intolerant of vice. For a pirate queen, that's almost funny. Still, the supply moves. It's not always labeled as opium. Sometimes it's medicinal herbs, sometimes incense, but it's there, woven into the scrolls, the manifests, the whispered conversations between quartermasters, and with it comes new dangers. You hear the whispers around the fleet, British merchants, angry about lost cargo, Dutch traders offering bribes for exclusive routes, Chinese officials torn between condemnation and quiet partnership. Everyone wants a piece. One afternoon, you overhear a heated argument between two captains. One wants to expand the trade, the other warns it'll bring foreign warships. Ching Shih doesn't intervene. She lets them argue. She wants them to think about the consequences. Historians still argue whether her decision to engage with the opium trade was strategic brilliance or a slow unraveling of her moral authority. But one thing is certain. She didn't do it for personal indulgence. She did it for control. Control of the coast. Control of the market. Control of the empire that refused to acknowledge her. Back on shore, you see the effects firsthand. A man slumped in a doorway. A young boy pawing through crates, eyes dull and distant. The fleet didn't cause this. Opium was already here, but it didn't help. You return to your ship feeling heavier than usual, not from the cargo, from the implications. That night, Lee joins you at the stern, feet dangling over black water. I used to think we were the good guys, you admit. Lee sighs. We're the organized guys. That's close enough. You think about that as the lanterns sway overhead, about how easy it is to lose track of where the line is, especially when your boots are always soaked in salt and soot and somebody else's secrets. But the fleet rolls on, because while empires argue in palaces and ports, the red flag fleet sails between them, unbothered, undefeated, unapologetic, and Ching Shih, she watches it all, arms folded, gaze unreadable. She knows where the world is going. She just refuses to let it go there without her. You spend the morning sharpening a penknife, not a sword, not a spear, just a stubby, dull little blade that's supposed to be used for trimming scrolls and slicing open sacks. But the quartermaster has you on supply duty today, which means fewer waves and more ink. You should be bored. You're not, because you're about to discover the secret side of piracy no one sings ballads about. Paperwork, bureaucracy, it turns out, is what really keeps the fleet afloat. You step into the belly of the record ship, a long, low barge with dozens of writing desks and one terrifying woman in charge. Her name is Madame Zhu. She doesn't shout. She doesn't smile. She just gestures at a stack of scrolls taller than your torso and says, "Start here." Each scroll details something different. Crew rosters, ration logs, tax records, death reports, bribe accounting, punishment tallies, cargo manifests, arrest warrants, some real, some fake. It's all handwritten, color-coded, and sealed with red wax, stamped in the shape of a stylized phoenix. Lee appears around mid-morning with a smirk. Thought you joined a pirate crew, not a tax office. You glare at her and return to double-checking how many sacks of rice were distributed to the blue flag ships in the last lunar cycle. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ching Shih maintained an extensive administrative apparatus within the red flag fleet. She delegated responsibilities to scribes, quartermasters, and trusted captains, maintaining tight control over supplies, loot division, and fleet coordination. This was not ad hoc piracy. It was governance with clipboards. You ask Madame Zhu how often the commander reads these records. She snorts. She memorizes them. And you believe it, because everything you see here, every boring list, every ink smudge scroll, has the same energy you've felt from Ching Shih herself. Cold efficiency, quiet power, and absolute command. Today's quirky tidbit: the Red Flag Fleet issued pirate receipts, actual stamped papers proving that cargo had been seized legally by pirate standards and recorded properly. These documents were sometimes shown to towns or merchants to avoid double theft or duplicate ransom payments. Organized crime? More like audited crime. In the corner of the record room, a group of young scribes copy scrolls with brushes the size of your pinky. They move in silence, interrupted only by the occasional sneeze or spilled ink. One boy writes backward, another counts aloud in Hokkien while calculating grain allowances. It's hypnotic, but it's not just numbers. One scroll you unroll holds names, dozens of them, all prisoners. Some have already been ransomed, names crossed out, amounts listed. Others are marked pending. A few have notations in red. Valuable. Daughter of governor. Return with apology. Married crew member voluntarily. Lee leans over your shoulder and taps one name. That girl, she says softly. She's crew now. Best lookout in the Green Fleet. You're struck by the quiet complexity of it all. These aren't just crimes. They're negotiations. Every prisoner, every ship seized, every fee extracted, it all flows through the same system. Pirates don't just capture people. They manage them. You help organize a ransom today. A captured merchant, pale and nervous, is returned to his family after his brother delivers 3 boxes of silver, a chest of tea, and, strangely, a Portuguese clock. The crew throws in a bonus, a politely worded thank you note signed with an official-looking chop. Historians still argue whether Ching Shih's use of administrative tools was meant to mimic the Qing bureaucracy or mock it. Some claim she wanted to replace the failing empire. Others think she was simply doing what no one else would, organizing chaos into something livable. Either way, it works. That evening, you sit on the record ship's roof, watching the sun melt into the sea. You've got an ink stain on your chin and a scroll tucked under one knee, an inventory of cured duck eggs. It's oddly comforting. Lee joins you with a bowl of taro porridge. So, she says, elbowing you, you still think piracy is all knives and drama? You grin. It's math and drama. She laughs, then grows quiet. She built it this way, she says, on purpose. If she dies tomorrow, it still runs. And you realize that might be the most brilliant part of all. Ching Shih hasn't just made herself powerful. She's made herself unnecessary. The systems, the codes, the scrolls, they don't rely on charisma. They rely on function, which means she's built something that might outlast her. You lie back, arms behind your head, staring at a sky full of stars and possibilities. Maybe you joined for the adventure, the danger, the escape. But now, you stay for the structure. It starts with whispers. A boat from the Northern Fleet drifts in just before dawn, sails low and dirty, hull still streaked with soot. The crew is silent as ghosts. One of them limps. Another won't let go of a small lacquered box. Their eyes avoid everyone's. You're in the galley, elbow deep in pickled mustard leaves, when Lee appears. It's real, she says, dead serious. The Emperor made an offer. You blink. What kind of offer? The last kind. Word spreads fast. By midday, the entire fleet is buzzing with fragments and speculation that the imperial court has officially offered a pardon for her, for all of you, for anyone willing to surrender, amnesty, immunity, even a title, a pardon from the emperor himself. You expect outrage or laughter, but instead, there's a strange hush, the kind of quiet that happens before a storm or a decision. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In 1810, after years of failed military campaigns and humiliating retreats, the Qing government offered Ching Shih a full pardon. She would be allowed to retire peacefully, keep her loot, and avoid punishment. It was unprecedented and so when it worked. But at the time, no one believed it. You find yourself summoned that evening, along with a dozen others, to the flagship. The commander is seated on a woven mat at the center of the deck, surrounded by maps and scrolls, no robes, no throne, just a short blade beside her knee and a teacup cradled in her palm. She looks tired, not weak, never that, but tired in the way granite is tired, after centuries of holding up mountains. A captain speaks first. It's a trap. Another shakes his head. It's a surrender. Ching Shih lifts a hand. Silence falls. We won, she says simply. The statement hangs in the air. A few crew glance at one another, unsure. She gestures to the sea beyond. We took the coast. We broke the salt tax. We bled the navy. We made the emperor come to us. You realize with a jolt that she's not being offered a pardon because she's weak. It's because she's unstoppable. Still, some resist. A young lieutenant stands, fists clenched. If we stop now, everything we've built, what was it for? She meets his eyes. To prove we could. Then she says something that sticks with you. The goal was never to stay pirates forever. The goal was to choose how we stop. That's your quirky tidbit. Ching Shih didn't just accept the emperor's offer, she negotiated it. On her terms, she demanded pardons for her entire fleet. She requested official post for key officers. She even asked to keep her wealth, and the government agreed because it was either that or face her at sea again. Historians still argue whether this was surrender or strategy, but those who saw it, who lived it, knew the truth. It was leverage, weaponized. In the weeks that follow, the tone of the fleet shifts. Training drills ease. The patrols become fewer. More time is spent on land. New scrolls arrive. Lists of names to be submitted for official approval. Diplomatic letters pass between the Red Flag Fleet and the Qing Court. You're tasked with escorting a captain to a coastal magistrate. The journey is tense. The paperwork, flawless. When you arrive, the official bows deeper than expected. He offers tea. You share a meal. It's all very normal, too normal. On the way back, you ask Lee, does this mean it's over? She doesn't answer right away. Then, it means we don't have to run anymore. That night, you watch Ching Shih alone at the stern, staring at the dark water, no fleet around her, just moonlight, just reflection. She doesn't speak, but you can feel her calculating, not how to fight, how to exit, because leaving power gracefully is harder than seizing it, and that's what she's doing. Making the final move on a board everyone else abandoned years ago. The sun is high when you dock at the capital's outer port, a grimy little inlet dressed up in silk banners and borrowed dignity for the occasion. You're packed shoulder to shoulder with a dozen crewmates on a barge that smells like lacquer and wet wood, eyes straining to catch a glimpse of the shoreline. But everyone's looking for her, and then there she is. Ching Shih steps ashore, not in armor, not in disguise, but in imperial blue robes edged with understated silver. No weapons, no guards. Just her and Chung Po Tsai, now clearly more husband than heir, walking side by side into the lion's mouth like they own it. Because, in a way, they do. A hush ripples through the assembled crowd. Officials from the Ministry of War, the Ministry of Revenue, and the local garrison are all here. You can spot them by their sweat. They're not used to standing this close to someone who once ordered cannon fire on their ships. And she doesn't bow. Not even a little. She simply steps forward, hands over a scroll, a clean red-ribboned agreement, then nods. That's it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In 1810, Ching Shih formally negotiated her surrender with Chinese authorities. She personally delivered the terms to the provincial governor in Guangzhou. As part of the agreement, she received amnesty, retained much of her fortune, and was even granted a title, not as a pirate, but as a noblewoman. You watch from the edge of the square, squinting in the harsh sunlight. There's no parade, no statue, just the quiet unraveling of a legend in real time. And yet, she walks through the court gardens with the grace of someone who still knows every captain's secret, every supply route, every port official who took a bribe and now looks very nervous. She knows where the bodies are. She placed most of them. That's your quirky tidbit today. Ching Shih didn't just retire. She secured pensions for hundreds of her crew, integrated parts of her fleet into the Imperial Navy, and even helped design coastal patrol schedules. Imagine the IRS asking the head of a criminal syndicate to organize tax collection and then letting her do it. Later that afternoon, you're summoned to a quiet courtyard near the magistrate's office. Lee is already there, sipping lukewarm tea and scowling at a neatly folded robe. "I'm supposed to wear this," she says, lifting it like it's crawling. "It's a uniform. Imperial Navy. Junior officer. Technically, she's now part of the same force that once tried to destroy you. Your government now?" You tease. She shrugs. "Only on paper." That night, you help organize the last fleet report, logbooks, rosters, final manifest tallies, no more pirate flags, no more coded messages, just clean ink on government scrolls. Historians still argue over the terms of her retirement, whether she was coerced, outmaneuvered, or simply tired. But the scroll you signed tonight, listing the decommissioned ships and resettled crew, reads like a surrender document wrapped in red silk, and yet it doesn't feel like defeat. It feels like a power move, because she's not walking away poor. She's not walking away humiliated. She's walking away in full control of her legacy. The next morning, you escort her to the palace gate, not the real Forbidden City, just the outer offices, where lower-tier nobility and military officials conduct their very official tea drinking and paper stamping. She doesn't speak as she walks, but her presence clears a path. You catch snippets from the crowd. She sank 17 warships. They say she reads faster than a magistrate. She made the admiral cry. By the time she disappears behind those carved gates, it's official. The pirate is now a bureaucrat, And just like that, the sea feels quieter. Back at the docks, Lee sits on a mooring post, flipping a coin between her fingers. So that's it, you ask? She nods. For her? Not for us? She tosses you the coin. We'll see. Because even as one chapter ends, another begins. And when pirates become politicians, well, let's just say the empire may never be the same. You never thought you'd wear a uniform, and yet here you are, trousers tucked, sleeves starched, a badge pinned to your chest that looks suspiciously like the same phoenix once stitched onto pirate sails, only now it's wrapped in the silk of legitimacy. You're on patrol. Officially, you're coastal security, a fancy title for former pirates now assigned to guard the very waters they once plundered. Your boat is clean, your scrolls are stamped, your salary comes from the treasury now, not the secret compartments of looted merchant vessels. It's surreal. Lee, now sporting a ridiculous topknot and a set of pristine boots she constantly complains about, rows beside you. She glances at your badge, then hers, then snorts. You realize we're arresting people for doing exactly what we used to do? You shrug, with worse paperwork, because that's the truth. The pirates didn't vanish. They changed uniforms. The Empire didn't crush the fleet. It absorbed it. Dozens of ships now patrol the Pearl River under official colors, run by the same people who once ran contraband through these same channels. It's a wild twist of irony. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many of Ching Shih's top lieutenants were incorporated into the Qing Navy after the pardon. Chung Po Tsai, her adopted son and husband, was granted the rank of naval officer and served until his death. Several pirate vessels were refurbished and repurposed as government patrol boats. And as for the commander? She retired. Fully. She left the sea, settled in the city, and opened, of all things, a gambling house. You visit it one evening, months after her surrender. It's tucked behind a silk shop in Guangzhou, guarded by two elderly men who used to captain war junks. Inside, there's the familiar scent of spiced wine, burning tangerine peel, and something deeper, authority. She sits at a low table, wearing a jade comb in her hair and a look of amused detachment. The gamblers speak in low tones around her. Some bow, others dare a joke. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She never has. You wait your turn, then sit. Still floating? She asks. You nod. Floating, but paid for it now. She pours tea. Your favorite blend. How did she remember? You don't miss it? You ask. She sips. I miss the silence before the cannons. You both laugh. That's your quirky tidbit of the day. Ching Shih never returned to sea after her pardon. She lived quietly in Guangzhou until her death in 1844, at the age of 69. She was never arrested, never punished, never poor. One of the only pirates in history to retire peacefully and die of old age. Outside, life continues. You hear the shuffle of dice, the clack of bamboo tiles, the distant clang of a patrol ship's bell. You think of the sea often, but not with longing. More like respect. Like a sibling you outgrew, but still send letters to. Historians still argue whether the Qing dynasty's decision to pardon Ching Shih was strategic genius or the last gasp of a failing administration. Some say it proved the empire could adapt. Others say it was a clear sign of weakness. But what no one disputes is this. She won. Not just the battles. The narrative. She rewrote what it meant to be a pirate. A woman. A leader. Back on your patrol boat, Lee reads aloud from a wanted poster. a minor smuggler, barely worth chasing. You let the oars drift. The tide pulls gently. Let him go, you mutter. Lee grins. Soft heart. No, you say. Just someone who remembers which side we were on last year. You both laugh, because everything's different now. And yet, somehow, not. You sleep that night on deck, wrapped in an old sailcloth that still smells faintly of brine and old gunpowder. You dream of red sails, but when you wake, it's to calm water and a clear sky. The Empire endures, but so does she. You're back on land these days, but your boots still carry the sea. The rhythm of walking cobbled streets instead of shifting decks is strange, too steady, too quiet. You miss the creak of timber, the snap of sails in wind, the faint sense that everything around you could tip sideways at any moment. Now, things feel anchored, but that doesn't mean they're boring because you've taken a new job. It's a little embarrassing to admit, but here it is. You now work in a gambling house. Not just any gambling house. The one. Hers. It's tucked away behind a spice merchant's stall in one of Guangzhou's less scrutinized alleys. At first glance, it's nothing special. Weathered wood, red paper lanterns, a carved phoenix over the lintel. But step inside, and you'll see the truth. The mahjong tables are imported. The wine is good enough to forget your name. And the woman behind it all, sitting just out of reach of the candlelight, is still sharper than the blade she hasn't worn in years. Ching Shih, the pirate, the wife, the widow, the commander, the bureaucrat, and now the house mother of a den filled with schemers, retired smugglers, and silver-tongued gamblers. She doesn't play, she watches. She runs this place like she once ran the fleet. Quiet, organized, and absolutely no cheating tolerated. You once saw a man try to slip a marked tile into play. He never made it to the front door. He was politely invited to relocate to the mountains. Without his shoes. Here's your mainstream historical fact. After retiring from piracy, Ching Shih lived in Guangzhou and ran a successful gambling house and brothel. Unlike many of her peers who died in exile or execution, she lived out her days in wealth and security, protected by the government she once fought. The clientele at her house ranges from minor merchants to major officials. Everyone knows who she was. No one says it aloud. It's part of the game. You don't insult the hostess by mentioning she once commanded 70,000 pirates. You just place your bet and hope she doesn't raise an eyebrow in your direction. Lee works the kitchen now. She claims it's temporary, but she's got flour on her elbows and recipes memorized. We were pirates, she says, kneading dough like it owes her money. Now we're caterers with trauma. You manage the ledgers. Again, there's a poetry to it, tracking incoming bets, house percentages, rotating schedules for entertainers, tea imports, surveillance bribes. It's like old times, just fewer cannonballs. But the most fascinating part? The people who visit, ex-Navy officers, officials from the very courts that once tried to have her hanged. Even one British merchant who once traded gunpowder for silks. He still thinks no one knows he shortchanged her. She knows. She knows everything. One evening, as you light the lanterns, she sits beside you. Do you miss it? You ask. The sea? She says. You nod. No. She sips her tea. The sea was never the point. You look at her. Then what was? She smiles, just barely. Proof. And that's your quirky tidbit of the day. Despite retiring peacefully, Ching Shih was still a power broker. She advised on trade deals, protected former crew, and occasionally intervened when city politics got too messy. People came to her for advice and for protection, because while her ships were gone, her reach wasn't. Historians still argue over her legacy. Some label her a criminal mastermind. Others, a proto-feminist icon. Still others see her as an opportunist. But the ones who knew her, they simply say she was in charge, and really, she still is. You stand at the door of the house that evening, watching the lanterns sway in the breeze, remembering the spray of salt and the boom of distant cannons. It's quiet now, but behind you, at the mahjong tables and beneath the silk fans, her empire continues in miniature, controlled, contained. But unmistakably hers. You're not a pirate anymore. You're something stranger, a survivor of an empire that never officially existed, built by a woman history tried and failed to contain. And as long as this house stands, part of that world still breathes. You know what's strange? It's how easily people forget. You're walking through one of Guangzhou's new districts, where the buildings are taller now, the tiles newer, and the children no longer stare when a woman walks by with a sword scar across her face. A lot has changed. Boats still crowd the river, but now they carry tax rice and palace-bound cargo, not pirate loot wrapped in fishnets. And yet, her name? It's fading. You hear a street performer one afternoon, an old man with puppet show, drawing a crowd with a tale about a sea witch who ruled the pirates and rode whales like horses. The kids giggle, the adults smile, but you just frown, because the story is about her. Kind of, sort of, not really. You nudge Lee, who stands beside you with a skewer of grilled squid. Is that supposed to be her? She chews. At least they remember something, but you're not so sure. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the mid-19th century, stories of Ching Shih had begun to blend with local folklore. Over time, historical accounts were embellished, transformed, and sometimes erased. Some tales portrayed her as a demon, others as a goddess of the sea. Most got the facts hilariously wrong. And honestly, that might be the real tragedy. Not that people forgot who she was, but that they replaced her with something more comfortable. Because the truth is messy. She was ruthless, strategic, compassionate when it suited her, merciless when it didn't. She protected her own and crushed her enemies. She wasn't a saint. She wasn't a villain. She was complicated. But folklore doesn't love complicated women. It prefers witches or martyrs, not accountants with machetes and military-grade spreadsheets. That's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some later folktales claim Ching Shih could vanish into mist or curse enemy ships with her gaze. In one version, she becomes a sea goddess who lures bad officials into whirlpools. In another, she retires to a mountaintop and gives birth to tigers. You find that one particularly insulting. She hated cats. At the gambling house, a new scroll appears, just 4 lines titled The Lady of the Waters. You raise an eyebrow. Lee laughs. Better than old lady with dice, but it gets you thinking. You dig through your old ledgers one night, the real ones, not the tidy accounts for the front of house, but the worn volumes you kept hidden behind a false panel in the pantry. They smell like sea salt and wax. Inside, Her life is written in ink and careful notes. You see the real woman again, the day she negotiated her surrender. The crew rotations she approved during a typhoon. A margin note in her own hand. Delay patrol until new moon. Wind pattern likely to shift. She was right. She always was. Historians still argue why she wasn't punished. Why she didn't end up in exile or hanging from a wall. Some say it was timing. Others, bribery. You think it was inevitability. She made herself indispensable, and the empire chose survival over pride. You close the ledger, run your fingers over the pages. Later, you walk to the edge of the river, where the lights of the city reflect like drifting lanterns. You see the children playing near the docks. One girl has tied a red scarf to a stick and waves it like a sail. You watch her for a long time, and something stirs, because even if they get the stories wrong, even if they forget the dates, the names, the blood, the salt, some part of her is still here, living in whispers, in red flags stitched onto school bags. In the uneasy respect, men still show women who speak with certainty. In the sea, which doesn't forget. She doesn't need a statue. She was never built to be worshipped, just remembered. You've started collecting stories, not the kind you write down, not yet, not the kind with scrolls and seals and grand imperial calligraphy. These are the whispered kind, the ones traded over tea in alley kitchens, or muttered between gamblers over late-night hands of cards. Because the moment people find out you served under her, they lean in a little closer. She once saved my uncle's fishing boat from bandits, says a fruit seller near the West Market. She paid for my sister's wedding, a widow whispers, pressing a steamed bun into your hands. My mother says she used to spy for her, confesses a boy no older than 13. She'd hide notes inside her hairpin. You don't believe all of it, but you don't laugh either. Because even if half these stories are stretched, they reveal something deeper, something that never made it into the government reports or the dusty ledgers. How many people she touched without ever meeting them. And it makes you wonder, how many women, how many girls, carved pieces of themselves into her shadow just to survive. You start to seek them out, quietly. The tea house maid in her 50s who used to sail small courier junks before the surrender. The shopkeeper's wife, with a faded tattoo of a phoenix, long hidden under layers of silk. The sword dancer who once fought in the White Flag Fleet, and now performs in street squares with laughter too loud to be fake. They don't call themselves pirates anymore. They call themselves retired, or washed ashore, or wise. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Women played a significant role in Ching Shih's Red Flag Fleet. Some served as captains, navigators, or spies. While most records focus on male leadership, contemporary accounts and oral histories confirm that women held power, sometimes more than their male counterparts. But these women, they were never written into history, not properly. Their stories were passed through hands, through glances, through offhand phrases that only made sense to someone who'd been there, someone who remembered the rules, the signals, the quiet dignity of those who followed the pirate queen, not for gold, but for safety, for fairness, for choice. That's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some rural villages in Guangdong province still hold ghost festivals honoring the Sea Sisters, a vague, blended spirit said to protect women on dangerous journeys. Historians suspect the tradition may have roots in the women of the Red Flag Fleet. You sit with Lee one night on the back porch of the gambling house. She's fletching a fishing line. Something to do with her hands. You think they'll write about her? You ask. Lee shrugs. They might. Eventually. Probably not well. Should we do it? She pauses. Write it all down? Maybe. She ties a knot with precision. Start with the truth, then let them make their legends. And that's the strange beauty of it. Ching Shih didn't just lead ships. She created a framework for women to lead themselves, in ways quiet and loud, bloody and brilliant, and even now, years after the last cannon fired, her impact hasn't dried up with the tide. It's in the woman who never bows to her employer, the girl who learns to read a map before she learns to cook, the mother who teaches her daughter to speak clearly, look people in the eye, and never flinch. Some say she was a revolutionary. Others, a realist. But you just remember her as the one who never flinched. But the women who came after her, they didn't wait for a label. They lived. You lie back that night, listening to crickets and distant flute music, the smell of boiled peanuts wafting in from the kitchen. You picture a fleet of ghost ships gliding silently through moonlit water, manned not by pirates, but by stories. Some sharp, some soft, all real, even if no one writes them down. You hear her name again, this time in a protest. It's been years since the last pirate flag was lowered. The Empire is still here, and the ports are cleaner, the uniforms stiffer, and the taxes higher than ever. You're standing at the edge of a market square, where farmers are arguing with an official about grain levies. Voices rise, fingers point, and then, unexpectedly, someone shouts, "She wouldn't have let this happen. Not the Phoenix of the South Sea, not Ching Shih." The crowd murmurs. Some nod, some scoff, but the name echoes, louder than the magistrate's warnings. You're stunned, because here it is again, her story, her shadow, cast across a generation that never knew her, but still carries her like a banner. Not as a pirate anymore, not even as a person, but as a symbol. Lee's beside you, holding a turnip she didn't pay for. Told you she'd last, she says, biting into it like an apple. You walk home slowly, watching the city shift. It's not the place you first staggered into, barefoot and hungry, all those years ago. It's modernizing, steam ferries, telegraphs, more walls, more rules, but every so often you see a flicker of her, a red ribbon tied to a fishing pole, a merchant woman haggling with a governor and winning, a little girl drawing a junk with dragon sails in the dust with her toe. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In modern China, Ching Shih's name has resurfaced in media, film, and literature as a folk hero, often reframed as a cunning leader who challenged authority and carved out her own empire. She's been referenced in pop culture, used in feminist essays, and even studied in military academies for her tactical brilliance. And that's not just nostalgia, it's legacy. You attend a festival in Foshan where someone has composed an opera loosely based on her life. It's inaccurate, to put it politely. In the second act, she defeats the entire Portuguese navy by summoning sea spirits. In the third, she marries the emperor. You and Lee laugh until your ribs hurt. They cut out the best part, you say, wiping your eyes. What, the ledgers? Lee teases. No, the part where she walks away and doesn't need anyone's approval, because that's the part no one remembers. They remember the storms, the swords, the sails. They forget the real revolution was this. She left power on her own terms. No execution, no mutiny, No tragic fall from grace. Just one final calculated step out of the spotlight. Today's quirky tidbit. A recently unearthed Qing court document lists Ching Shih as a respectable widow of modest influence, with no mention of her past. It's possible the empire deliberately rewrote her into obscurity, either out of embarrassment or fear, because what's more dangerous than a pirate? A successful one who retires. You sit that evening in the doorway of the gambling house, watching the lanterns sway. A girl walks past, maybe 9 or 10, trailing behind her grandmother. She pauses, stares at your badge, and says, "Is it true she had red sails?" You nod. "The brightest you've ever seen." "Was she mean?" You think, "No," you say softly. "But you didn't want to disappoint her." The girl smiles and runs to catch up. Lee leans in the doorway behind you, arms crossed. "When are you going to write it down?" "What?" "All of it. Properly." You shrug. Still deciding where to start. She grins. "You already did." Because that's the truth, isn't it? She never wanted monuments, or temples, or statues made of bronze. She wanted continuity. And if memory is the real monument, then hers is towering, not because she fought, but because she refused to vanish. You return to the harbor one last time, not because you have to, not because anyone called, but because something inside you wanted to see it again. The dock where you first stepped off that leaky skiff with salt in your ears and nothing in your pockets. It's quieter now, cleaned up. The trash piles are gone, the fish guts are scrubbed away, and a guard with an official hat nods at you like he doesn't recognize who you used to be. You smile politely. You don't correct him. The harbor's changed, but the sea hasn't. It still breathes. Waves still roll in like lazy thoughts. The same seabirds still circle above. Somewhere far out. You're sure you hear a sail snapping in the wind. You walk the length of the dock, passing barrels of tea, crates of porcelain, little boys pushing carts full of dried shrimp. No red sails in sight, no flags, no phoenixes, but you can still feel the imprint of that old world under your feet. It never left. You sit on the edge, shoes off, heels dipping just over the waterline, and you let your thoughts drift backward, to the first time you saw her, to the first order you followed, to the first moment you realized you weren't surviving, you were belonging. She made that happen. Not just for you, for thousands, sailors, women, children, people no one counted. She saw them. She gave them a system, a code, a future. Here's your final mainstream historical fact. Ching Shih died in 1844, at the age of 69, a wealthy and respected businesswoman. She was survived by her children and remembered, for a time, in official records as a retired widow of good standing, not a pirate, not a legend, just another name in a file, but names in files don't change the world. People do. She didn't build monuments. She built people, gave them rules, gave them structure, gave them a place to stand when the rest of the world told them to kneel. And though she's gone, her influence ripples through time, in whispered stories, in tattooed dragons, in red ribbons worn by girls who don't know why they love the sea, they just do. That's your final quirky tidbit. There's a popular Cantonese slang term still used by market vendors and ferrymen, Phoenix price. It means a deal so good. You wonder who negotiated it. Some say it comes from her, that she once haggled a shipment of rice so low, the price itself became legend. You like that. You sit until the tide begins to rise, licking the soles of your feet. Then you get up. You walk slowly, one last time, past the old stone markers, past the fish stalls, past the boys shouting over card games in the shade. You pause at the tea house, where she once held court, without speaking a word. And then you turn away from the water, not because you're leaving her behind, but because you carry her now. You're home again now, wherever that may be. No sea spray in your face, no salt-cracked hands, no cannon fire in the distance. Just breath. Just quiet. Maybe you're lying in bed, one arm draped over the covers, or curled up on a sofa with a fan humming nearby. The night feels deep now, long and soft around the edges, and the story, her story, is slowly settling into the folds of your thoughts. You saw a woman rise from a brothel to command the greatest pirate fleet in history. You saw her outmaneuver empires, rewrite law, and retire on her own terms. You saw her choose stability over glory, saw her win without needing to be worshipped, and maybe, just maybe, you saw a little bit of yourself in her, defiant, tired, capable, clever, not always right, but never easy to erase. Let that stay with you as your eyes grow heavier. You don't need sails to feel power. Don't need flags to be part of something bigger. Sometimes, just remembering matters. Quietly, steadily. The way waves remember the shape of every shore they ever touched. So, breathe in, let it all go. You're not lost at sea. You're floating. Carried forward, still, by the tide she started. End of script. Sweet dreams.